The allegations Meghan has made are simply not true. Her account does not reflect what actually happened, and it has led the public to a deeply misleading impression. That version of events has no basis in...
The musicians were already seated. Hundreds of guests were moving through the palace doors. Then Prince William looked toward the final receiving line and froze. Standing between invited patrons and senior dignitaries was Meghan, composed, prepared, and apparently expecting to enter. Within seconds, the future king raised one hand, summoned the nearest equerry, and made a decision no one inside Buckingham Palace believed he would dare to make: cancel the entire event. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William entered the Grand Hall beside Catherine moments earlier, speaking calmly to an aide about the evening. The Commonwealth Youth Leadership Reception was more than another palace gathering. It honored young leaders from Commonwealth nations under the authority of the Prince and Princess of Wales. Diplomats, charity founders, campaigners, and family members had arrived believing the night would strengthen William's growing public role. Then his voice stopped, his eyes fixed on Meghan, and every trace of ease left his face. Catherine followed his gaze and felt the mood change before anyone spoke. She tightened her fingers around her program, a printed guide showing the order of speeches and official greetings, while Meghan remained in the guest line with a restrained smile. The Duchess had not been expected. Final attendance had been locked 48 hours earlier, meaning every name had passed through palace security, royal protocol, and William's private office. Her presence could not be dismissed as a misplaced card or a confused member of staff. William set his program on a side table and called the senior equerry closer. An equerry is a royal officer who manages schedules, movement, and formal duties around a senior member of the family. The prince lowered his voice, but the words carried unmistakable force. "No one enters until I know who authorized this." The officer looked toward Meghan, then back at William, understanding that the evening had shifted from celebration to crisis. The decision came seconds later. Prince William ordered the Commonwealth Youth Leadership Reception cancelled after discovering Meghan standing in the official guest line despite her name being absent from the approved list. Palace staff began closing the reception room doors as confused guests were redirected toward the courtyard. Catherine stayed beside her husband, visibly unsettled, while Meghan refused to step away. She turned to a security officer and spoke with quiet certainty. Her invitation, she said, had come from someone whose authority William could not simply overrule. The event had been stopped, but William's greater shock was still waiting. Meghan was not claiming a clerical error, she was claiming that the invitation had come from inside his own family. To the guests outside, it appeared to be a sudden palace disruption. To the four people trapped at the center of it, the cancellation meant something far more dangerous. For William, it was a challenge to his authority. For Meghan, it was public rejection. For Catherine, it reopened a wound she believed had finally been contained. And for King Charles, still unaware of what was unfolding downstairs, it threatened to expose a private decision he had never intended anyone to discover. William stood at the center of the crisis because the reception carried his name, his responsibility, and his promise to the young leaders who had traveled to attend. As official host, he controlled security, guest approval, and the purpose of the evening. The guest list was not a casual arrangement. It was the final record of who had been cleared to enter, greet the royal family, and take part in the formal program. If Meghan had appeared without approval, then someone had challenged his authority inside an event he was expected to control. Catherine felt the danger in a more personal way. An aide guided her into a private withdrawing room, a small chamber used by royals to wait or recover away from public attention. She sat without speaking and removed one glove finger by finger. The princess was not burning with anger. She was shaken. Someone had placed Meghan directly in her path without warning, forcing her into a confrontation before hundreds of guests and reopening tensions she believed had finally been pushed behind closed doors. Meghan remained near the security desk after being removed from the line. She kept her expression controlled, but when an official asked her to move farther from the entrance, humiliation flashed across her face. This return mattered, because entering a formal palace event would prove she still possessed access, relevance, and a possible route back into royal life. Years of distance had not erased the power of that doorway. Being turned away from it made the rejection painfully public. William demanded to see the invitation. The cream card carried the correct palace insignia, the official symbol used to confirm that a document came from the royal household, and it listed the private arrival time reserved for distinguished guests. Everything about it looked convincing, yet his office records contained no matching name, no approval, and no sign that Meghan had ever been cleared. Charles received the news upstairs through a handwritten note from his private secretary. He read Meghan's name, placed the paper down, and said nothing. The king's silence lasted long enough for the aide to understand that he was not surprised. Then another discovery changed everything. A palace official traced the card to a small batch controlled by the sovereign's private household, meaning the office serving Charles directly. That discovery shifted the crisis away from Meghan's arrival and toward a far more painful question. What had happened before this night that made William see her presence as a threat severe enough to empty an entire palace room? William's decision did not begin at Buckingham Palace. It began 6 weeks earlier, inside a smaller room at Windsor, during what was meant to be a quiet family discussion, with no cameras and no public consequences. That evening ended with Catherine leaving through one door, Meghan standing defiantly beside another, and William giving his staff a private instruction that would later determine everything. No unexpected royal guest was ever again to be admitted under the cover of reconciliation. Charles had arranged the Windsor family reconciliation meeting because he feared another year of public division would weaken the family before several major Commonwealth engagements. The meeting was meant to be private, tightly controlled, and limited to relatives whose names had been confirmed in advance. A reconciliation meeting, in simple terms, was a closed family discussion intended to repair damaged relationships away from public pressure. William and Catherine agreed to attend only after the king personally assured them there would be no surprises. The first 30 minutes passed with careful words and guarded expressions. Then the door opened. Meghan entered without warning. William stopped speaking and closed the folder in front of him. Catherine turned toward Charles, searching his face for an explanation, but the monarch gave none. Meghan took the empty chair near the king and said she had been told the conversation concerned her future as much as anyone else's. The prince felt the promise made to him collapse in that instant. His wife felt something colder, the certainty that her consent had never truly mattered. Meghan soon turned to Catherine and asked whether she intended to block her from future royal charity events. The princess answered quietly that boundaries were not punishment. They were protection. Meghan pushed back at once, accusing the couple of deciding her future while denying her any chance to speak for herself. Charles tried to calm both women, but William noticed something that made every explanation feel hollow. A seating card bearing Meghan's name had already been placed beside the king. William lifted it from the table and stared at Charles. Someone had known she was coming. Someone had prepared for her arrival while assuring him she would not attend. Later, in a private conversation recorded in the monarch's official meeting notes, the prince demanded to know who had approved the change. Charles refused to identify the person, saying only that he had hoped the family could speak before another opportunity disappeared. That refusal became the point of no return. William issued a sealed protocol instruction, a formal written rule controlling access to events under his authority. It stated that no former working royal could enter unless the invitation appeared on both the central guest register and his personal approval list. The Buckingham Palace reception was the first major event governed by that order. That meant Meghan's appearance was no accident. It was either a direct challenge or a secret attempt to bypass William's control. Now, standing only rooms apart beneath the same palace roof, William and Meghan were about to confront the unresolved anger Windsor had merely postponed. The palace corridors had emptied, but the real confrontation was only beginning. William entered the antechamber without photographers, guests, or ceremonial protection. Meghan was waiting beside the fireplace, still holding the invitation that had brought the evening to a halt. Catherine stood near the closed door. No one bowed. No one exchanged pleasantries. William looked directly at Meghan and asked the one question that would decide whether the cancellation had been justified or had exposed a deeper betrayal. William had requested the meeting before any public statement could be issued. He wanted the truth before the palace created a softer version of it. Meghan agreed to remain, but only because she refused to leave until her invitation was recognized or the person behind it was named. Catherine stayed as well. The reception belonged to the couple's charitable program, meaning both had shared responsibility for its guests, security, and public purpose. Meghan's return affected her position as deeply as it challenged his. William placed the official guest list on the table and turned it toward Meghan. The list was the final approved record of every person permitted to enter the event. "Where is your name?" he asked. Meghan did not look away. She said she had been invited privately and would not accept being treated like an intruder simply because his staff had not been informed. The Duchess lifted the cream card and said Charles wanted her present as a gesture of healing. Catherine's expression tightened at once. She asked why reconciliation always arrived without warning, and why the cost of that healing always seemed to fall on her. Meghan answered with restrained anger. She said no one could demand peace while denying her a voice, then insist her presence was itself the problem. William stepped closer and took the card from her hand. The sovereign's embossed mark, the raised royal symbol showing that a document came from the monarch's household, appeared genuine. But one detail was missing. The card carried no countersignature from the Lord Chamberlain's office. A countersignature is the second official approval, confirming that an invitation has passed through proper palace procedure. Without it, the card looked legitimate but remained incomplete. William asked who had delivered it. Meghan said the invitation had arrived by hand, with a verbal assurance that security had already been arranged. At first, she refused to identify the messenger, insisting that the authority behind the card should have been enough. Catherine watched her carefully, while the prince warned that every seal, envelope, and delivery record would be traced. That threat broke the silence. Meghan finally named a senior member of the king's private household, someone who had acted under what she believed were direct instructions from Charles. The confrontation had exposed the invitation, but not the decision behind it. To uncover that, William would have to challenge the machinery surrounding the throne, and perhaps the king himself. Royal power rarely announces itself with raised voices. It moves through signatures, private notes, sealed envelopes, and instructions spoken quietly enough to leave no witness certain of what was actually ordered. Inside the king's study, the disputed invitation was placed beside the approved guest register. Charles removed his glasses and stared at both documents. William stood opposite him, no longer speaking as a son seeking reassurance, but as the host whose authority had been undermined inside his own palace. Charles held ultimate authority over Buckingham Palace, yet events assigned to William were managed through the prince's household. That arrangement created delegated control, meaning the king remained sovereign while the host controlled the practical decisions around guests, security, and access. One wrong instruction could therefore become more than a family mistake. It could expose a dangerous confusion over who truly had the final word. The private secretary entered carrying a slim file and confirmed that several blank sovereign invitations had been kept for discretionary use. A sovereign invitation was a card issued in the monarch's name for guests selected outside the normal list. Even those cards, however, were supposed to be coordinated with the host's office before delivery. This one had not been. William looked directly at Charles and asked whether he had invited Meghan. The king hesitated. Charles finally admitted that he had approved the idea of extending an invitation, but he insisted that his staff were meant to discuss it with William first. He had hoped an evening devoted to young Commonwealth leaders might offer neutral ground, a place where service could matter more than old wounds. The prince listened without interrupting, then answered with a sentence that struck harder than anger. Reconciliation arranged in secret is not reconciliation. It is an ambush. The private secretary lowered his eyes. In a documented account prepared for the monarch after the meeting, he admitted that he had authorized delivery of the card after interpreting Charles's remarks as approval. He had kept Meghan's name off William's list because he believed the prince's office would reject it before the king could step in. Charles picked up the invitation and studied the unfinished countersignature line. In that moment, the truth became impossible to avoid. His wish for peace had been used to bypass the safeguards William created after Windsor. What began as a private family gesture had now become both a constitutional clash and a personal betrayal. William did not soften. He told the king the reception would remain cancelled unless Charles publicly accepted responsibility for the breach and confirmed that Meghan would not be quietly returned to the guest line. Charles now faced a brutal choice: protect the appearance of royal unity or admit that his own household had triggered the most humiliating palace cancellation in years. By the time the first official explanation reached the courtyard, the evening had already collapsed. Guests in formal dress stood beside waiting cars. Young charity representatives clutched speeches they would never deliver. Inside, staff removed untouched glasses from silver trays. Yet the sharpest consequence belonged to Meghan, who watched through a tall palace window as an entire reception disappeared because William had refused to allow her through one final doorway. Palace officials announced that the reception had been postponed because of an internal security and accreditation failure. Accreditation was the formal process used to confirm that every guest had been approved, checked, and cleared to enter. No immediate reference was made to Meghan, but the sudden closure of the doors, the presence of senior security officers, and the speed of the cancellation told everyone that something extraordinary had happened. Diplomatic staff began contacting embassies, charities, and youth delegates before rumors could spread further. The cost of rearranging the evening was serious, but the damage to William's public image was even greater. The event carried his name and represented his growing leadership. By canceling it himself, the prince had protected his authority, yet he had also disappointed hundreds of people who had trusted him to deliver the night they had been promised. Meghan received the order to leave through a private side entrance. She looked down at the cream invitation, folded it carefully, and handed nothing back. Her voice remained controlled when she told the official, "I came because I was asked to come." The Duchess did not argue again, but the humiliation followed her toward the door. She had arrived expecting recognition. She was leaving as the reason an entire palace event had failed. Catherine entered the empty ballroom after the final guests had gone. She saw the place cards still arranged across the tables and turned to William with pain rather than anger. The princess told him that hundreds of people had now been dragged into a family conflict they never agreed to witness. He answered that allowing Meghan to enter would have destroyed every boundary they had fought to establish. Neither believed the other was entirely wrong. Charles faced his own reckoning upstairs. The private secretary offered to resign in a documented letter placed before the king, but the monarch refused to accept it immediately. He understood that the deeper failure belonged to him. His attempt at reconciliation had begun without the consent of William or Catherine, and now everyone was paying for it. William ordered every sovereign invitation issued during the previous month reviewed. Staff found that Meghan's card was the only one delivered outside the normal approval chain. This was no widespread error. Someone had created one exception for one person. Before leaving, Meghan sent Charles a direct message. "You told me there would be a place for me." The king read it alone, then asked William to meet him without advisors. The public crisis had begun, but the fate of the family now rested on a private conversation, in which Charles could no longer hide behind his household or his crown. There were no secretaries in the room, no ceremonial uniforms, and no prepared statements resting between them. Charles stood beside the window, while William remained near the door, both men exhausted by a night neither could reverse. For once, the argument was not about protocol. It was about trust. The king wanted to repair a family before time made that impossible. His son wanted to protect his wife, his work, and the boundaries repeatedly crossed in the name of peace. Charles began with a private conversation he had held with Meghan days earlier. She had asked whether there was any respectful path back into limited family occasions without returning to formal royal duties. Those duties were the official public responsibilities carried out on behalf of the monarch, including ceremonies, charity work, and state events. The king said she had not demanded a title, a role, or a return to the old arrangement. She had asked only whether one door remained open. William listened, but his expression did not soften. Charles explained that he chose the Commonwealth reception because it was charitable, rather than ceremonial. He believed the evening might offer neutral ground, where service mattered more than status, and no one would be forced into a public family display. Yet the monarch admitted the truth that had driven every mistake. He did not tell his son because he expected an immediate refusal. William answered with painful calm. He admitted that canceling the event had damaged young delegates, embarrassed palace staff, and created a public scandal around work meant to inspire people. But allowing Meghan to enter after his office had been bypassed would have sent another message. It would have shown that his authority could be ignored, and that Catherine's sense of safety could be sacrificed whenever someone called the sacrifice reconciliation. Charles finally sat down. The king confessed that he had been trying to avoid choosing between his son and his daughter-in-law. William replied that refusing to choose openly had not protected either of them. It had only forced everyone else to suffer the consequences secretly. The truth followed. Charles confirmed through the documented account of his private call with Meghan that she had not forged, stolen, or invented the invitation. She entered the guest line because she genuinely believed the sovereign had cleared her attendance. William absorbed that admission in silence. The betrayal no longer belonged to one person. It belonged to a process built on fear, secrecy, and hesitation. Then the monarch accepted responsibility. He agreed to support William's cancellation publicly and promised that no future attempt at family reconciliation would be attached to an official event without the host's clear approval. William agreed to reschedule the reception. He also refused to attack Meghan in the palace statement. But the decision had come too late to contain the story. Father and son had finally reached an understanding, yet beyond the palace walls, one image was already defining the night before either man could explain it. By sunrise, the cancelled reception was no longer a private royal failure. It had become the only story Britain wanted to discuss. One photograph dominated every screen. Meghan standing beneath the palace archway, with the cream invitation pressed against her side, as a security officer guided her away. To some, it captured humiliation. To others, defiance. But the image carried one undeniable message: William had seen her in the line, and the doors had closed. News organizations quickly confirmed that Meghan's unexpected attendance had triggered the postponement. Palace communications described the cause as an accreditation breach, meaning a failure in the formal process used to approve and clear guests before entry. Commentators, however, saw something larger. They framed the crisis as a struggle over access, authority, and whether family ties could still override the rules governing William's public role. The country divided almost instantly. Some supporters defended the prince for protecting a controlled charitable event from a secret change he had never approved. Others argued that canceling the entire reception punished young delegates, diplomats, and charity leaders for a dispute that should have remained behind closed doors. The same decision looked like strength to one side and cruelty to the other. Meghan watched the morning coverage from her residence. Presenters debated whether she had tried to force her way back into royal life, while panelists questioned why she had trusted an invitation that never appeared on the final list. She remained composed until footage of disappointed youth delegates appeared. Then the Duchess reached for the remote and turned the television off. William faced a different kind of pain. Messages from cancelled guests filled his office, including notes from young leaders who had traveled for months to attend. The future king read them in silence, until Catherine reminded him that defending a boundary did not erase the suffering caused when that boundary had to be enforced publicly. The princess did not accuse him, but her words made the cost impossible to ignore. Outside Buckingham Palace, the public reaction became impossible to contain. A crowd gathered near the Victoria Memorial, as newspaper vendors raised a front page carrying the headline, "Palace Doors Close. William Cancels Night After Meghan Arrives." The image turned a private failure into a national symbol. A national broadcaster then displayed the authentic invitation beside the blank guest list entry. Its report explained that Meghan possessed royal permission, but lacked event approval. That distinction changed the argument. The blame began shifting toward the secret process that had placed every person involved in an impossible position. Charles finally authorized a statement accepting that communication from his household caused the breach. It cleared Meghan of deception and confirmed that William had the authority to stop the event. With the truth finally placed before the public, the monarchy could no longer survive through silence. It would have to show what lesson had been learned when the reception was held again. 7 days later, the ballroom doors opened again. The same young leaders returned. The abandoned speeches were restored to the lecterns, and William entered with Catherine beside him. Charles was present too, seated quietly in the front row. Meghan was not there, yet her absence no longer carried the suggestion of an unexplained ban. The palace had acknowledged the invitation, admitted its failure, and accepted the boundary William had enforced. What remained was not mystery, but consequence. William had personally ensured that every delegate was contacted, and that disrupted travel expenses were covered. The Commonwealth Youth Leadership Reception, a formal gathering designed to honor young people serving communities across member nations, had finally returned to its original purpose. The prince opened the evening with an apology. He did not hide behind palace language. He told the guests that their work had been overshadowed by a failure that should never have reached them. Catherine had found William alone before the doors opened, reviewing his remarks for the third time. He admitted that the cancelled evening still troubled him because innocent people had carried the cost of a decision meant to protect one boundary. The princess answered with quiet firmness. Regret, she told him, did not automatically mean the choice itself had been wrong. Sometimes a necessary decision could still leave pain behind. Charles had already issued a formal statement confirming that his private household sent Meghan's invitation without completing the host's approval process. A formal statement is an official public account issued in the monarch's name. It also confirmed that William acted within his authority when he suspended entry and canceled the reception. For once, the king did not soften the truth to protect appearances. Meghan received something more personal. Charles sent her a private letter apologizing for offering an invitation he could not guarantee. She read it twice, placed the cream card inside the envelope, and understood what the night had exposed. No real return could begin through secrecy, surprise, or an attempt to force acceptance before trust had been rebuilt. William did not demand punishment for the secretary who delivered the invitation. Instead, palace procedures changed. No sovereign guest could be added to another royal's event without written approval from both households. Charles retained the right to pursue family reconciliation, while the prince gained clear control over events conducted under his name. The cancellation was not a victory over Meghan, and it did not prove reconciliation was impossible. It proved something harder. Peace cannot be manufactured by placing wounded people together without consent. William's decision was painful, disruptive, and severe, but royal unity built through secrecy was only another form of fracture. When the final applause filled the ballroom, the verdict was complete. The palace had reopened its doors, but never again would family reconciliation be allowed to enter through a hidden invitation. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.